Can we be real for a second? How on earth do faculty expect us to complete our assigned readings each week? Between completing projects in the office, spending time with our family, and managing to take more than one shower a week, there just isn't time to read hundreds and hundreds of pages before each lecture. Now, for years, I thought I just had to suck it up and deal with it. That the exhaustion I was feeling from spending all of my free time reading was a natural consequence of me not completing college when I was supposed to. But what if I told you there's a way to complete all of your reading assignments without spending every second of your free time with your nose stuck in a book? Hi, I'm Edward, and I'm an educator who teaches adults how to change their lives through higher education. Consider subscribing to learn everything you need to know to maximize your time in college, even while balancing school with work and family life. So the first strategy I have for you to complete all of your assigned readings on time is to create a reading schedule. Now, before you run away, just hear me out. For years, I wasn't a calendar or planner type of person. For me, it felt too rigid, and I never really kept to it anyways. But I promise you that once I started implementing a reading schedule and using a calendar on a regular basis, I was able to relieve myself of a lot of stress. And I didn't waste time procrastinating doing things that I shouldn't be doing. By having a schedule, I knew what I should be doing every minute of my day, which sounds a little bit intense, but as adults with families and work and school, we really do have to commit to blocking out intentional time to complete everything that we need to. Once you've decided to commit to putting these things into a planner, it's important that your reading schedule doesn't cannibalize the rest of your life. To do this, you're going to want to be sure to keep your reading blocks down to only 30 minutes at a time. I know it's really tempting to sit with our textbook for 3 or 4 hours a night, especially before a big test. It's actually much more effective to read in short bursts and to have these small pockets of reading time scheduled at various points throughout the week. This helps keep the information fresh in your mind and gives your brain essential time to process what it's just taken in. And the last tip for creating our reading schedule is to utilize quiet times throughout our day. If you have an extended lunch, maybe you can carve out a little bit of time to get a reading session in, or maybe it's after the kids have gone to sleep for the day. By leveraging those quiet points in our day, it's going to be easier to focus so that we're not wasting our time rereading pages. Now, building on the idea of finding quiet time, our second strategy is to find a reading space. Before just grabbing your textbook and plopping down on the sofa amidst the chaos and the noise of the day, really ask yourself, what are the ideal conditions for you to read? For some of us, that means we want absolute silence and a brightly lit space. For others, maybe we prefer something that's a little noisier with background music and dim lighting. Regardless, it's important to know your preferences so that way you can try to emulate those the best you can while you are reading. For many of us, reading a textbook is already not the most enjoyable thing on earth, so do your best to make the environment comfortable. Suddenly, the thought of staying up late to read my textbook doesn't sound so bad if I'm cozied up in my favorite chair with a good cup of tea and enjoying the quiet time. Our third strategy to get through all of those pages is to prime your brain before you start reading. By prime your brain, I mean it's important to get into the right mindset before you actually start reading. Tell me if this has ever happened to you. You sit down with your textbook to read, so you just start plowing, and you go and you go and you go, and then 25 pages later, just as you're about to finish your goal for the day, you stop and ask yourself, what did I just read? Here you are thinking you're almost done, and then you realize you checked out pages ago. Now that may have happened because you weren't in your ideal reading situation, but oftentimes it happens because our brain just wasn't in the right mindset to start reading. So before you start, you'll actually maximize your reading session if you sit and just think about the content a little bit. Ask yourself, what happened in the last lecture again? What was the last chapter about? And start getting into that mindset. This way, your brain knows where to find the information that's already stored about this class and can start filtering new information into it. So instead of information just flooding your brain and then escaping magically through your ears, I guess, your brain knows exactly where to file it. So that way, next time you go to retrieve it, it's sitting exactly where you expect it to be. The last strategy I want to share for getting through those assigned readings is actually 2 strategies in one. It's called the preview review, and I promise it's going to change the way you read forever. First, let's talk about preview. Now, as if getting through hundreds of pages weren't enough, our professors actually expect us to do it before we attend lecture. That's always felt really counterintuitive to me. Aren't I going to lecture so that you can explain to me what's in the book? Then much later in my life, I learned that professors want us to come to class having read so that we have the context we need to make sense of their lectures. But getting back to our point of how do we read so many pages before class, especially if we're taking 4, 5, or 6 classes in a term, previewing your textbook or your articles is something you do before class to give you the context you need to make sense of the lecture, but without forcing you to read every single word. For previewing, you're going to want to set some time aside before lecture to go through the most important elements of your assigned readings. This includes things like reading chapter summaries or abstracts, all of the headings, subheadings, bulleted lists, anything that's differentiated text like highlighted, italicized, bolded, and look over any charts, graphs, or other visuals. Oh, and don't forget to read the conclusion at the end of the chapter or article. True, we haven't read through every word of the assigned readings before class, but you should have enough context to sit through the lecture and not feel completely lost. In a perfect world, you'll preview your text twice before each lecture. The first time you'll do 1 or 2 days before class, give your brain some time to think about it, and then the second time you'll do immediately before lecture for the 15 or 30 minutes before class. Now let's move on to reviewing the text. So we've already primed our brain for lecture by previewing the information. We've gone to lecture, absorbed everything there. We asked our questions, we made sense of things, we took notes. Then we want to use our text to follow up on what we just learned in lecture, or review. The review process is when we do a more thorough reading of the text. But you don't need to read every single word. Instead, if there are sections of the lecture that you felt great about, you understood everything, it made a lot of sense, you took fantastic notes, then feel free to skip those sections of your textbook. Why waste time reading something that you already feel good about? This strategy then allows you to focus on bulking up the places that you weren't so sure about in lecture. Think about the things that confused you, the questions that you had that maybe you didn't get a chance to ask, and you'll want to read those sections in your textbook. You'll want to be sure to be thorough with the review and use all of those great active reading strategies like asking yourself questions and summarizing and taking notes in the margins. So what we see is that the preview review becomes this sandwich for lecture, where we're previewing text before so that way our brain is primed and ready to take in information, and then we follow up and review to answer any questions that we have. And there you have it. You now have my secret formula for getting through all the assigned readings without sacrificing the more important things in your life. It really is that simple. I want to challenge you to get started today. Find time to sit and create your reading schedule and start implementing some of these strategies. If you learned something in this video, please like it and subscribe to this channel so we can go through this crazy work, school, family life thing together. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.